Hi, this is Richard C. I'm a math tutor at Wyzant, answering a question submitted by a student who's obviously taking pre-calculus at the moment, and he wants us to evaluate this expression, the arcsecant of 1. So there could be a couple of reasons why this student is confused. First of all, when we write arcsecant of 1, that's the same thing as saying secant, the inverse with that little inverse over it of 1. And that's the way you're going to deal with it on the calculator, because you might notice that over your sine, cosine, and tangent buttons are these inverse sine, inverse cosine, inverse tangent. So that might be one thing that's causing the confusion. It's just this. Now this arcsecant, arcsine, arccosine, so on, that is older notation. This is more modern notation, but you'll see both of these even on a SAT or an ACT. You might see this older notation, so watch out for that. So that might be one issue, or perhaps the student doesn't understand what this really means. It just means you want an angle. So the arcsecant of 1 means what angle has a secant equal to 1. That's all it's asking. So to write it more formally, the arcsecant of 1 is this angle, we'll call it theta. It has a secant of 1. So let me just phrase this a little better. Find theta where the secant of theta is equal to 1. Now you'll notice on your calculator you don't have a secant button. So, and on the unit circle we generally don't consider secants. And so you really want to write the secant as 1 over cosine. So 1 over the cosine of theta is equal to 1, which means the cosine of theta equals 1. So I think you just want to do this by hand and not mess around with the calculator. Just go to the unit circle. And here's my unit circle, 1 comma 0, 0 comma 1, negative 1 comma 0, and 0, negative 1. And remember that the cosine is the x-coordinate. So here, the x-coordinate is, just going to circle that. So the x-coordinate is 1 here and 0 here and negative 1 here and 0 here. So the only solution here is that theta is equal to 0, because that's the only time that the cosine is equal to 1. Here the cosine's 1, here it's 0, here it's negative 1, here it's 0. So it's a fairly simple thing to find if you know your unit circle if you really get desperate, you can go on your calculator. Assuming you're allowed a calculator, you can go on your calculator and you can type in the inverse cosine of 1. It's just the angle whose cosine is 1. And I'm going to type that in now and just make sure it pops up the way I think it does, and it does. So cosine, and then up pops 0. So that means that the angle is 0. So theta is 0. Okay. So fairly simple, but there is a lot going on here. Part of it is notation. Part of it is just interpreting the, this says find, F-I-N-D, it's a little hard to read. It is interpreting what the inverse function really means, inverse tan function. It means find the angle who has that for which the secant is equal to 1. Okay, I hope that helps. That's it for this problem. See you next time. Bye-bye.